their life standard. It is our task to honor what others have accomplished for us, to acknowledge the privileged position we are in. We live now in a world where rights because of others having cleared this path for us with their own sweats. We have nothing left than to clear the future path, to have the courage that no matter how tough situations are, we can reach more. This is not only my fight, it's everyone's fight, because tomorrow this could be your son's story, your daughter's story, or your own story. It is our task to keep the future bright. To all my fellows today here, awareness here today, I salute you for your resilience and your courage. Thank you so much.
Incredible statements by two incredible women. There's really nothing left to say, except to thank all of you for your presence here today. We have a stand-up crowd. This shows how important this issue is here in Washington, here in the United States, and to this administration and to the American people. So we're very grateful for your presence here today. Once again, we are grateful for the presence of the First Lady. Ma'am, again, you have honored us. Thank you. And to the 2017 International Women of Courage awardees, thank you all for what you have done and all that you will continue to do. Thank you for your bravery and your commitment. We honor you and we honor your work. We had an opportunity to take a photo with these incredible women, but we did not have an opportunity to take a photo with them holding their awards. So if you don't mind, if I could just ask you to hold tight for a moment as we gather them here and take a photograph with the First Lady. But again, thank you all very, very much for being here today.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the 2017 International Women of Courage Awards. Please stay seated as the awardees exit the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Keep up the great work, okay? Keep fighting.
We will continue,
Yes. We all will.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we're going to come out of this event. Thanks for watching. Thanks for bearing with us as we dealt with a little bit of technical difficulties here on our end. We brought you continued coverage of the incident on Capitol Hill earlier, and then jumped over here to this event with First Lady Melania Trump at the International Women of Courage event. That is slow to conclude here as we round out, and we're going to bring you back to the scene. On Capitol Hill, we still have our camera out there, or a camera out there that's giving us continued footage of what we believe is to be the vehicle that was involved in the incident. You can see this dark-colored sedan. Windows seem to be blown out, some glass damage, and cordoned off area. If you're just joining us, welcome to Fox 5 Live, bringing you live events and coverage from here in D.C. and all over the nation. Of course, we focused this morning on the events of Capitol Hill. Earlier this morning, outside the Rayburn building and the U.S. Botanic Gardens, there was an incident with a driver who was driving erratically, made a sudden U-turn, didn't stop in front of the Library of Congress, and Capitol Police essentially apprehended this person, and a female suspect is in custody. Shots ended up being fired, but no injuries were reported. So here, this is sort of the information that we had earlier, that we do have. There is a female suspect in custody. Not a lot of further detail out that we haven't brought to you already. But just so you know, here's a live picture of the Capitol this morning. That is current, the Capitol Dome on a sunny spring day here in D.C. And we're going to just bring you live coverage of everything we got as we get it in. Switching it back over to this scene on Capitol Hill. Looks like we have a camera there in case anything changes. But quickly, we did get permission from Congressman Kevin Cramer of North Dakota to use his video as he was in an Uber earlier this morning. He tweeted out a video of himself in the back seat, I think, or front seat, possibly, getting a shot of the beginning of this incident. Check this out here. Out a video of himself in the back seat, I think, or front seat, possibly getting a shot of the beginning of this incident. Check this out here. Out a video of himself in the back seat, I think. You can see here, he was telling us that he was taking an interesting trip to Interior today. Thanks, Capitol Police, for your service, is what he tweeted out. And some were saying they could see guns being drawn in this shot. You can see he sort of sits there at this traffic stoplight before police come out and sort of usher them to take a turn. Check it out here. And that's what we had for you for that little tweet video. And we're going to just bring you continued coverage of what we have on this incident from earlier this morning. Live pictures here of the scene near Capitol Hill, southwest, outside of the Rayburn building and U.S. Botanic Garden. You can see here a little bit of a wider angle. Looks like that camera has zoomed out of police car, Capitol Police vehicles being towed. It looks like we saw one earlier being towed the back way. Some more footage here right outside the United States Botanic Garden, that conservatory, all the plants, the gorgeous plants inside. It's right on that strip, that busy sort of thoroughfare off of Independence Ave Southwest. So we'll bring you continued footage of this, and if we have anything new and breaking, new information, we'll bring that to you as well. All right, guys, if you're just joining us, you're looking at live pictures of what seems to be police and authorities dealing with a vehicle. There it is, going up to get towed away, I believe, a vehicle that perhaps was involved in the incident earlier this morning. It has not been confirmed that this was the vehicle, but this is what we see right now that they're focusing on, getting out of the scene. You can see the windows. It looks like they're blown out. It looks like there's broken glass on this dark-colored sedan. What we do know is that, according to U.S. Capitol Police, earlier this morning, a woman was taken into custody after police say she struck a U.S. Capitol Police cruiser near the Capitol. What we know is that it was outside the Botanic Gardens there on Capitol Hill, outside the Rayburn building as well. There it is, being loaded up. Looks like to be taken away. And what we know is that a suspect's vehicle, the vehicle was headed up Independence Avenue around 9:22 a.m. when it was spotted driving erratically. Now, U.S. Capitol Police were trying to stop the suspect on Independence Avenue, and it was a female driver. That female driver made a U-turn, nearly striking officers and hitting at least one vehicle, one U.S. Capitol Police vehicle. So during an attempt to arrest the suspect, shots were fired, but no one was injured. Capitol Police did not say how many shots were fired or where they landed. So we do not know the details. Again, this vehicle has not been confirmed to be the one involved, but you can see sort of a close-up on that windshield, on that glass. Looks like there is a good amount of damage done to that vehicle that you're seeing now on your screen. Now, a spokesperson for the U.S. Capitol Police Communications Director stated that the incident had no connection to terrorism, but police obviously were dealing with it very seriously, and as they would at any incident, with any incident near the Capitol building. So you're looking at a live picture. There's a shot of a damaged police cruiser. The front of that car looks pretty beaten up there. So we're getting some live pictures from that scene, the perimeter of that scene, where we had some of our reporters also run down to that scene who were on their way to things, and they reported that things seemed calm and tourists were still making their way around. It was still sort of business as usual on this busy street during a busy time of day. Now it's just about noon. It is noon here, and this happened about 3 hours ago. So you can see sort of things have cleared up. Still some caution police tape there as they clear the scene right there outside the Botanic Garden. That glass sort of dome houses some of the gardens there, that conservatory on that strip. So just bringing you this live information as they try to get this car out of there, and we'll bring you any more information as we have it. Thanks for watching Fox 5 Live. And guys, just to recap the official statement from United States Capitol Police officers, I sort of dictated some of that to you earlier, but we do know that the suspect was placed under arrest and transported to Capitol Police headquarters for processing. More details and those preliminary charges will be released later today, and we'll bring all that information to you for sure on our evening shows tonight. But right now, just about noon here in D.C., you're looking at live shots of this vehicle being removed from the scene. There it is. They just towed it up onto this truck. It looks like a piece of another vehicle, possibly the police cruiser, also being laid on that tow truck for removal and processing.
assimilated more quickly than those communities.
All right, guys, you're watching Fox 5 Live. We're going to switch it over to the meeting of a lot of the nation's prominent mayors. They're meeting with Secretary Kelly of the Department of Homeland Security today. We caught up with some of them. We have some footage of that now. We're going to bring that to you from one of our live cameras.
Sure, with a judicial warrant that comes from a court with a probable cause suspicion that people are all the time given over and deported. We want ICE to be focused on those violent criminals, not on the grandmother who has overstayed her welcome.
And we're just going to switch it over now to inside the White House, where Sean Spicer is giving his daily briefing.
Is an issue that every American, regardless of your political background, can and must get behind. We must work together, from the leaders of the most local and community recovery and support programs, all the way to the White House, to solve this problem. The White House took a big first step this morning in our battle to combat drug addiction and the opioid crisis by meeting with these individuals, which included New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who has been a leader in this issue, Attorney General Sessions, Education Secretary DeVos, Veterans Administration Secretary Shulkin, Homeland Security Secretary Kelly, and others were in attendance. A full list of participants has been provided. I will say, I know the pool was just in there. It is some of the stories from some of the individuals who have been involved in this with a family member are unbelievably compelling. Their desire to see and to work with the administration to get this problem addressed is one that is plaguing communities, and I know the president places it at the highest priority. There was a mention by the acting administrator of the DEA that they have a program where twice a year they gather unwanted drugs. Last year they gathered over 1 million pounds of unwanted drugs. There's 5,000 sites in which people across America can drop off stuff in their medicine cabinet that is no longer used to get it out of their house. The next drop-off will be on April 29th, and I think the DEA will be putting out more information. But when you see some of the action that was taking place in this report, it is truly a call to arms for a crisis that is plaguing our country. This afternoon, the President will drop by the Women's Empowerment Panel that the White House is hosting, led by Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, Small Business Administrator Linda McMahon, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley, Senators for Medicare and Medicaid Services Seema Verma, who will all speak about the unique challenges that women and young girls face today. Vice President Pence and the First Lady will also be in attendance. The President is proud that his administration is full of so many female leaders, from who will be on stage this afternoon to those so that their incredible work doesn't always make headlines, but is certainly felt across the federal government and across our nation. Women's History Month is coming to an end, but the Trump administration is committed to empowering women in the workplace. The work that we started this month will not end at the end of this month, but will continue. The President made women's empowerment priority throughout the campaign, speaking out on affordable child care and paid family leave, investing in women's health, and the barriers faced by female entrepreneurs and business owners. In February, he and Prime Minister Trudeau from Canada launched the United States-Canada Council for Advancement of Women Entrepreneurs. This month, the First Lady hosted an event for International Women's Day in the East Wing. CMS Administrator Verma hosted a panel on women in healthcare. His daughter Ivanka held a roundtable with women business owners with SBA Administrator McMahon, as well as other roundtable with Latina business owners. And just earlier today, the First Lady joined the Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, Tom Shannon, to present the 2017 Secretary of State's International Women of Courage Award at the State Department. The President believes, as the First Lady said this morning, quote, "Wherever women are diminished, the entire world is diminished with them. However, wherever women are empowered, towns, villages, schools, and economies are empowered, and together we are all made stronger." The Trump administration will continue to work to ensure that the American economy is a place where women can work and thrive. Later this evening, the Vice President will participate in the swearing-in of David Friedman as the next ambassador to Israel. The President is glad that Ambassador Friedman will be officially on board as we strive for a lasting peace in the Middle East. Mr. Friedman's strong relationships in Israel will be a tremendous asset to the President in furthering that mission. Finally, I want to speak about Judge Gorsuch and the blatantly political obstruction of his nomination to the Supreme Court by Senate Democrats. Yesterday, the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said that next Friday, the Senate will vote to confirm Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. We welcome this news. Unfortunately, Senate Democrats have begun justifying their opposition to Judge Gorsuch by claiming a 60-vote standard for his confirmation. That standard doesn't exist, and these claims continue to be false. A party line filibuster by the Senate minority is not a fair up or down vote. You don't have to look further than the voices of many of these same Democrats to see why. In 2013, Senator Tom Udall said, and I quote in full, "Some of us may disagree with Justice Scalia on judicial philosophy, but he was a qualified nominee. He received an up or down vote, and he was unanimously confirmed. Likewise," he said, "Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg was considered a liberal, the former ACLU general counsel. Many on the other side may have disagreed with her views, but there was no filibuster. She was confirmed by a vote of 96-3, end quote. He added, quote, "A minority in the Senate should not be able to block qualified nominees," end quote. We could not agree more with Senator Udall. Unfortunately, he has now adopted a new party line of obstruction in blocking a fair up or down vote on the confirmation of Judge Gorsuch. It's both sad and unfortunate, and we encourage all senators from both parties to fairly evaluate the judge's eminent qualifications and grant him an up or down vote. With that, I'd be glad to take your questions. April,
Well, thank you, Sean.
how are you today?
I'm fine, and how are you?
Fantastic.
Well, Sean, going back to some issues that are in the news, Nunez is not going to recuse himself. In the midst of all of this back and forth, what does the White House say about that?
Well, April, the White House, as I think I mentioned this yesterday, I mean, he's conducting an investigation. He is the elected or appointed, I can't remember how they do HIPSI over there, but appointed and confirmed or however but by his colleagues in the House and the Speaker. He is the chairman. He's conducting an investigation. It is up to the House of Representatives and the Speaker and the members of the House Republican Conference to determine. But I mean, there's nothing that I see that is problematic in him conducting an investigation that we asked both the House and Senate Intelligence Committees.
What are the conversations the President is having with Paul Ryan about this? Because many, to include Dems and Republicans, are talking about what looks like impropriety in the Intel chief's handling of this so far, particularly as there's not a hearing right now.
Well, I would take issue with I think you're right that there may appear to be certain things, but I don't think there's any actual proof or sustaining allegation about anything that's done. Again, I mentioned this yesterday. If you look at what Chairman Nunez has done, he has met with people who are cleared to discuss classified information regarding a review that he is conducting. That's how it's supposed to work. And again, I understand that when things are leaked out in the media, that somehow that is a standard that's acceptable, but when two people who are cleared to discuss classified information, or three or however many, discuss classified information, somehow that's wrong because it's not being leaked. He is conducting a review, which we have supported on both sides of the chambers, and I think that they should do this. But I think to start to prejudge where this thing is going, we have been supportive of it, as you know, and I think that let's let that process bear itself out and see what happens. I will tell you that I've seen reports in the media that the NSA has documents that they are supposedly trying to get to the House Intelligence Committee that have been requested. We think that's a great thing, if that's in fact what's happening. But again, I think part of this all gets back to that there is a process. And I get that sometimes it's frustrating to us. I believe that we want this over as much as I think some of you, but we recognize that there's a process that has to take place. And that process is taking place. The chairman and the House Intelligence, and I know that Senator Burr and Senator Warner are talking about the process that they're going to go on the Senate side. Some of these things take a little bit of time, and to the extent that they are gathering the appropriate documents and looking at those things, then that's part of the process and the review that is being undertaken, and we're fine with that.
And second topic, tax reform and infrastructure. Reports are saying you're going to do it together. And ACA, Obamacare, going into Trump here at that time, tax reform and infrastructure were said to be some of the reasons why you did not come up in the budget with eliminating the debt. Do you have cost estimates as it relates to tax reform and infrastructure as of yet?
No, because I think you need to have plans laid out first, and I think part of this is that we're in the beginning phases of both of those. To have a score on either one of them or a cost when we don't have those formalized yet, and I think we're in the beginning phases of having those discussions with both stakeholders, members of Congress on both sides, and obviously internally the formulation of those plans is continuing. So until that happens, I don't see us having a formal cost or a score.
Trust CBO now?
It's not a question of trust. Remember, I want to be clear about what I've said before. I think when it comes to cost estimates and budget issues, which is what CBO is charged to do, they are the Congressional Budget Office. And while I think sometimes they're a little off on that, that is what they're charged with doing. And I think there's a score where I think it's not a question of trust, it's a question of accuracy. And I think that the issue that we previously brought up was when they had scored people and coverage, which isn't necessarily their wheelhouse. They had been way off. And again, I don't think it's a question of us trusting or not. It's literally a question of saying they believed that 26 million people would be on Obamacare, 10.4 were and falling. I think that's not a question of whether we trust them or not. It's a question of that those are the facts. And those facts bear out that they were off by more than 50% when it came to counting people. And I just want to be clear that it's not a question of whether we trust them. I would ask whether that's really what they're supposed to be doing. Major.
Sean, let's go over a couple of things that we talked about on Monday. On Monday, you said to us from the podium you would look into how Chairman Nunes was cleared here and with whom he met. Can you give us, we tried to ask you that yesterday as you walked out. Do you have any information to live up to the commitment you made here on Monday to provide more details about how that happened in a process you just told us that, again, is above board and totally appropriate?
I don't have anything for you on that at this time. But again, I don't.
What are you looking into?
I have asked some preliminary questions. I have not gotten answers yet, and I think so no, I don't have anything further on that. But again, I would argue, Major, it's interesting, and I brought this up the other day, that there seems to be this fascination with the process. It's how did he get here? What door did he enter? As opposed to what's the substance of what we're finding. When I get, not from you, and I'm not trying to be, but it's so many times I get these calls that we have an unnamed intel source that says the following substance occurred. Do you admit it? Do you deny it? Whatever. And we have this argument over substance. In this case, the fascination is with what door did he come in? Who did he meet with? How did he get waved in? As opposed to what I think it should be, and ironically it's not when it's the shoes on the other foot, is what's the substance? Just yesterday, just to be clear, we started this day with the Washington Post falsely posting a story saying the White House blocked Sally Yates, right? By the end of the day, it's officials blocked Sally Yates. They were wrong, and they jumped to a conclusion based on whatever unnamed sources. And I think that what we're trying to do is argue that there should be a process. The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and others are going through a review. We support that review. And so as much as I understand that everyone wants to jump to how did everyone get in? What did they do? They're undergoing an investigation.
I have a substantive question about that.
Okay.
But I'm just asking you about something you told us.
No, I said I would look into it.
Are you going to continue to look into it?
I will. I will look into it, and whether or not.
You live up to that obligation?
No, I will. But the obligation is I said I would look into it, and I would continue to do that.
Okay. So, you said yesterday about Sally H., show what you know. Well, one of the reasons that there's this question about Chairman Nunes is he hasn't told his own committee members what he knows, how he learned about it, and what the substantive importance of that is. So we are also curious about that. And among the things that might be, or might shed light on that, is how he got here and who he met with and what he learned.
Right.
We're trying to figure that out as well.
I understand, and I think those are questions for
Don't
him.
you wanna know those
And I
things?
think, I also think,
standard he
but
should be
I
held
think
to?
that, Major, that there's a slippery slope that we're talking about here, because if we start looking into certain things, then the accusation the next day is going to be, you looked into this. Can you look into that? Why did you ask this person or not? I mean, a couple of weeks ago when there were stories about whether or not we called certain people and we didn't. So we're damned if we're doing, we're damned if we don't on this stuff. Because on the one hand, you want certain answers. On the other hand, you want to talk about us being involved. And I think we've tried to keep, we asked for an investigation. And at the same time, we've tried to make sure that we allow that review to go on, that both the House and the Senate Intelligence. So we can't cherry pick every time that you decide that a piece of information is relevant to what you want. I think that we know that they are undertaking a review. Hold on.
Going on, and the members of the very committee
But that's
themselves say they don't know
fair enough,
what is
and that's
being discussed.
right.
How is the process going forward? How is that a workable process?
Okay, but what I'm saying is, the answer to that question is that's a question for Chairman Nunes. I don't have any authority over how the House Intelligence Committee conducts itself. That's a question.
You have authority about whether he gets into this building and can
I-
review secured information on this site.
But how he conducts himself with his members, when and where he shares things, et cetera, are issues for him and the committee and the House of Representatives, not for us. That's it, plain and simple. John.
Sean, we know that members of the House Freedom Caucus, the Tuesday Group, Republican Study Group, are up on the Hill trying to see if they could come to some sort of an agreement to find a way forward on health care. How real does the White House think this possibility of resurrecting health care is?
Well, I think the president from the early days of his campaign talked about repealing and replacing. It's a commitment that he made. I think he'd like to get it done. But he also understands, and I don't want to be, I want to be completely consistent with two things. One is he understands that in order to get to 216, we have to make sure that it does what he said it was going to do, that it achieves those goals of lowering costs and creating more options. And so we're not going to create a deal for the sake of creating a deal that ends up being not in the best interest of the American people. You've got to know when to walk away from a deal that is going to end up bad. And he wants to have a good deal. And so the deal that he's looking for is willing to have members come and talk to him and engage with on this whole area and figure out what it would take, what their ideas are to get there to grow that vote. And if they can do that and get to an area where we will have a majority of the House and can move it to the Senate, then we're going to engage in that. But we've seen members of both sides of the aisle engage with the White House on ways that are potentially ways to get there. And so it's a conversation, and we're not trying to jam that down anyone's throat right now. It's an ongoing discussion.
Does the White House share the frustration of many Republicans in Capitol Hill and the sentiments that the House Freedom Caucus, quote, botched this?
I think the president's comments on this speak for themselves.
I just have one more.
Of course.
And on the same thing. The president and members of the White House have suggested that maybe we could get some Democrats on board, health care reform. That the fact that no Democrat, not even one Democrat, supported the last attempt, and given the desires of the Freedom Caucus versus what the Democrats would be looking for, isn't it reasonable to think that even one Democrat would come on board this?
No. I mean, I think it is not unreasonable to.
No, I said, is it reasonable?
I think it depends on how they want to get there. I mean, again, there's a balancing act. It's not about just picking up one. It's picking up enough to get to 216, and it's what does that take without compromising the principles that you want to achieve. So is it possible? Sure. That there's a handful or so, or maybe more, Democrats that are willing to engage, but it's worth the conversation. But again,
isn't this kind of a Bader tactic to say, okay, if you're not going to work with us,
It's not-
Freedom Caucus, we're going to go to the Democrats?
No, it's a tactic to get to. I mean, it's a math tactic. It's how do you get to 216 in this case, and it's engaged with whoever will get you to that number. Now, as I mentioned yesterday, I mean, over the course of 17 months, Obamacare, failed and started multiple times. It went off on multiple different tracks, including single payer, until it finally came back. And ultimately, upon Scott Brown's election, they jammed it through and did it so quick to make sure that the Secretary of Human Services. But I get it. And so we're 21 days into this process, 22 probably today. So we'll see. But I think the idea that the president has put out there is that if people want to float ideas and suggestions on how we can grow this vote and get to a majority, he'll entertain them. Tamara.
Yeah, thank you. I have sort of a lightning round about opioids. Is a commission being created? Is Chris Christie the head of that commission? He was sort of talking about it, but I haven't seen anything on it. And what sort of timeline will that commission have in terms of presenting findings, or what's the goal of this thing?
Well, I think it's easier to start with the goal. I think if you see the roundtable, and I know the pool will have a readout of this afterwards, the goal is to figure out, I think Governor Christie's been a leader of this in New Jersey. It's an issue that plagues countless communities more and more. And so, whether it's New Hampshire or other places in the Midwest, it's sitting there and figuring out best practices and how can we get it down and how can we provide the treatment. I think the DEA administrator was noting in the discussion that we've gotten really good at law enforcement, right? But the question is, how do we focus on the treatment? How do we focus on the prevention? How do we look at things that happened in the past to deter drug addiction from starting in the first place and to deter young people in particular from starting with drugs? To now, how do we help families cope with this? There's a lot of it, and I think today is the first step of bringing some of these stakeholders together. But like I just mentioned on the other thing, I appreciate that everyone wants the answers, but I think that there's a reason that you're looking at this as two things: a whole of government and a whole of person, right? It's looking at how do we look at people to help them get the recovery, stay clean, not start in the first place, help them get them into treatment centers, help them get a job afterwards. I mean, there's a lot of whole of person, but then there's a whole of government. As I mentioned, I mean, you're looking at, around that table today, you've got families and parents and individuals who have been personally affected in one way, shape, or form. You've got Governor Christie, who's dealt with it at a state level. You've got Pam Bondi, who's looked at it from a state level. You've got Secretary Kelly, who's looking at it from Homeland Security, DEA, who's looking at it partially from a law enforcement. Then you've also got, Secretary of DeVos, who's looking at it from an education and a prevention. And it is a big, big issue that is plaguing our country, plaguing our communities, and plaguing our families. And so I wish I could give you an answer and say this is how we're going to solve the problem. But I think the first step is understanding the problem, the magnitude of it, and looking at how we approach it holistically. Yeah.
The timeline
Yeah.
for them coming back with findings, and then the president, when he was campaigning, seemed to endorse the STOP Act, which would prevent fentanyl from being imported, or helped prevent fentanyl from being imported from countries like China. Would he use his presidential bully pulpit to sort of push for that legislation now, which has not really gotten off the ground yet over in Congress?
That was one of the, not the specific piece of legislation, not the topic in particular, but I think there was a lot of discussion about fentanyl and the rise of it today. And I think the Attorney General brought that up and was talking about the escalation of that from the 1980s to now. And so there is a look at it. But I again, as I mentioned, you've got the Attorney General there, law enforcement, education. Part of this is to really look at this and figure out what are the ways that we can address it from coming into the country. And the DEA administrator was talking about it, especially the flow from the southern border. But then you look at it from a law enforcement issue, a prevention issue, and a treatment issue. And this is I wish I could give you a really easy answer and say, here's the silver bullet that's going to stop this. But we recognize the growth of this problem and this epidemic, and how do we solve it going forward? John Gizzi.
Thank you, Sean. Yesterday, Prime Minister Theresa May signed the letter that began the process for Brexit. A week ago, on Friday, Jean-Claude Juncker, who is the President of the European Commission, used some unusually strong language about the President, saying that his comments encouraging other Brexits could lead to war among the Balkan countries. And he also said in the end, and is quoted on page 1 of the Financial Times, that the President does not know a lot about Europe. What is the President's response to that?
To Brexit in particular? Or
to the comments by President Juncker of the European Commission and to Brexit?
I think the President is very well steeped in world affairs, especially Europe, NATO, all the issues. He was a leader in the effort to call Brexit, as you know. I mean, and obviously with respect to that, we respect the will of the British electorate and Her Majesty's government in taking steps of departing the European Union, whatever future the UK-EU relationship looks like. We want the UK to remain a strong leader in Europe, for both the UK, the EU, and Europe to remain strong leaders globally. So, I think both on the EU and on that's Ronica.
Sean, thank you. I have two questions or topics, if you will. Just the first, what's the White House reaction to the shooting today at the Capitol?
Well, it sounds like a very troubled individual. Obviously, I'll let law enforcement read that out, but I don't want to get ahead of. From what I understand and what I've seen, it sounds like a very troubling instance. I think, again, I don't want to get ahead of this, but it looks like law enforcement. I appreciate the efforts that the Capitol Police and others took. I mean, you literally watched people put their lives in harm's way today to protect tourists and other citizens, and so I want to commend the work of the Capitol Police and the work of law enforcement to continue to protect us at this time when Washington is in its glory with the cherry blossoms out and so many people are coming here to visit the Tidal Basin and their House of Representatives and the Senate and walk around Washington, D.C. It's reassuring to know that so many brave men and women are willing to put their lives on the line to make sure that the city stays safe.
A second topic. Last weekend, the President spent the weekend here, not at Mar-a-Lago. I'm wondering, was that in any way in response to some of the pushback he's received about the cost associated with those trips? And part two of that, does he plan to be here again this weekend?
So no, yes. He will. The President wanted to be here last weekend. He wants to be here this weekend. He'll be here, and then I will have updates on where he'll be going forward. But
does he feel any concern about that pushback?
no, he feels great. Hunter.
Thank you, Sean. President Trump is reportedly expected to sign legislation that would allow internet service providers to monitor internet activity and sell that information without users' permission. Will he be signing that legislation, and why does he think it's good for America? I'm wondering who this benefits apart from ISPs and their executives.
I know the House and the Senate have just passed that. When they enroll it, then we'll have further updates on that. I'm not. When we have, I know that I believe we have a statement of administration policy on that bill out, and we have further updates on a signing ceremony. I will let you know.
Doesn't this erosion of protections create major risks for people to use that information for nefarious purposes? Also, hostile nations potentially looking at what congressmen are browsing online. Like, is that concerning to the White House?
I think there's, as I mentioned, that we have a statement of administration policy on that bill. That we'll have further updates, and when we do, we sign it. I'm sure we'll have further details on why. Zeke.
Two questions on two topics for you. The commander of CENTCOM was up on the Hill earlier today and testified that the U.S. government believes that Russia has been supplying materially the Afghan Taliban. I was wondering if the White House has any response to that testimony, and does it believe that that's a constructive effort?
I'm sorry, who's testifying?
The commander of CENTCOM.
Yeah, okay.
That's a constructive effort on the part of the Russian government in that region.
I know there's several entities looking into this, and I'm not going to, I will say that DOD's response speaks for itself. We understand the intelligence on this. The president's been briefed on it. So I'm not really sure what specifically you're
not condemning that action on the part of the Russian government right now.
I think the commander, the CENTCOM commander's testimony speaks for itself on that.
Second topic for you. About a month from now, the government will run out of money for another CR, as I'm sure you're aware. The president talked a lot about the campaign and in his budget request, funding for a border wall on the southern border with Mexico. Is that a deal breaker for the president in any sort of government funding measure in the next month or so?
So on April 29th, the CR expires, the continuing resolution, and we are going to be working with Congress on that, on the FY17 budget that needs to go forward. I know Director Mulvaney has talked about that. I'm not going to get into the specific details. I know that if you saw the budget they put out, I think it's $1.6 or $1.7 billion that he's initially put in the FY17 for the beginning of that wall, and there's 2.5, 2.6
billion isn't there.
I think that is our request. We will continue to work with Congress on how to move forward with the rest of fiscal year 17's budget. Blake?
Thanks, Sean. Let me pick up where John left off on healthcare. The president here last night, speaking to senators, said, quoting here, "I know that we're all going to make a deal on healthcare that is such an easy one. I have no doubt that it's going to happen very quickly." What is the renewed sense of optimism, and what exactly is very quickly?
Well, I think there's a little bit of sound that needs to go with that. I think he was having a little bit of fun with some previous comments that have been made with respect to how easy it would be to get health care. But there is a renewed sense because I think, the comments and the calls that the president has gotten, as well as the vice president and other members of the senior team that have come in and said, we believe that there is a path forward. We have some ideas. We'd like to talk to you about that. I know I've seen some of the reports that have been put out regarding some of the individual members of the Senate and the House that have been up here meeting with our team. And I think there's a lot of people who have some ideas about how to move forward, and we're entertaining those. But I think the interesting thing is that despite the setback that we got last Friday, I think there is a renewed willingness from a lot of members who've made commitments to the American people and to their voters that they want to see this done, and they understand that not getting this done means that, as I said, and the president echoed when he went up to the House Republican Conference, that there's going to be a consequence for this. People need to be taken at their word. There's a lot of members that made a commitment to their voters, to their constituents, that they were going to get something done on this and repeal and replace it and address the healthcare situation, and that hasn't gotten done. And I think that's a concern for them.
And let me ask you real quickly, you say that you embrace the House Intelligence Committee review of all of this. John McCain said earlier today that because of the potential schism within that committee, that there should be a select committee that goes from this. Would you embrace that if that happens, and what would your response?
I don't, again, and I'm not going to get into House and Senate matters, but I don't, as I mentioned at the outset to April, I believe that people, like, all that is, how they conduct themselves internally is up to them. That's obviously not for us to decide. But I think the question that I still think is outstanding is that what has happened is a review was called for, that part of it was already ongoing from what I understand, especially on the House side. And the chairman of that committee has gone and sought information and individuals who believed that information to further the review. I'm really not sure how that's anything other than what you're supposed to do. And I think that is consistent what he's talked about. Dave Boyer.
Sean, thanks. Two questions. You mentioned Senator Udall opposing the Gorsuch nomination. He was here at that party last night. Did the president try to work with the room with him and other Democrats about the nomination last night?
I know he and the First Lady and others spoke to a variety of senators. I wasn't keeping tabs on everybody that he spoke to, but I do know that he had an opportunity to speak to a lot of different senators, and he's talked to a lot on the phone. So I don't know about Senator Udall himself.
And secondly, 2/3 of the Democratic senators did not attend the party last night. Did that disappoint the president?
I think we were excited to see the 1/3 that did. I know Senator Schumer was there, Senator Durbin. There were a lot of folks. And again, I think that I'm sure the president will continue to do things like this. It was an amazing opportunity to have a moment sort of free of politics and to enjoy some collegial moments with each other in the White House and listen to some of the United States and Marine Corps bands play some amazing music. And bring people together. And I think the president's talked about this. He's mentioned this a bunch of times, that there used to be a time when you could sit down and share a meal together, go. And I think that's what he's been trying to do, is bring groups back in and at least just have a conversation and get to that human side a little bit. And so yesterday was a good start, I think. Jonathan.
Hey, Sean, the president's got in his inbox a letter from Senate Democrats. And the Democrats say they are ready and willing to work with the president on improving Obamacare. They just have a couple of conditions. First, the president has to abandon his efforts to completely repeal the law and rescind the executive order. This letter is signed by the vast majority of the Democrats in the U.S. Senate. What does the president say?
I think, as the president's noted, we're willing to engage with people. I think they understand his principles. We need to repeal the law and replace it with something better. I understand.
But they're saying they want you to take full repeal off.
I understand what I've seen parts of the letter, and I know that 40 of them saw that. And I think what we need to do is figure out who wants to engage in a constructive conversation. I understand what they want, but again, it's not just a one-way street. I think the president has made very clear what he wants to do. And I think that to the extent that some of them want to have a conversation, we have a 52-seat majority in the Senate. If there are individuals in there that want to have a constructive conversation achieving the goals, we can do it. But I think they also need to understand the president's red lines.
But they say as a first step they want him to repeal that executive order. Is that something he is willing to do?
I think the president's committed to making sure that he continues to go down the path that he's gone down. And there are ways that if they want to join him, that they can. And I think there are some areas that they may want to engage with him on that we've seen so far. And so, I understand they have a right to put out a letter and draw their lines in the sand, but I think the president's committed to going down the path he is. And obviously, first step is to get to 216 in the House and then address the concerns in the Senate. But he's continued to have conversations with the Senate, and I think that as Obamacare continues to struggle, which it is, the premiums continue to go up and up. I think the question is, will those 40 people understand that they are the ones who are going to be responsible for owning the current policies that are making so many Americans struggle?
But
Jim.
just to clarify, was he joking when he said that making a deal on health care would be an easy one?
I think if you watch the tape, it was a lighthearted moment, Jonathan, and so he was having a little.
He doesn't think it's easy to.
No,
get a
he
new
was.
deal on.
Yeah,
Okay.
no. Watch. He was having a fun time with the senators there. Jim.
The other thing that the president said last night was our soldiers are fighting like never before in Iraq.
Yeah.
And as you know, Sean, U.S. Troops there are in a support role, an advise and assist role. What does he mean? What does the president mean when he says they're fighting there like never before? Obviously,
I think
doesn't take into consideration what happened during the Bush administration and the Obama administration.
No. I
Fighting
appreciate.
house to house.
Yeah, I think that there's been some progress, particularly in Mosul, the way that they have taken back that city, and I think that for a long time there was a lot of concern about Iran moving in and dominating parts of Iraq, and I think with the advice and consent of U.S. military advisors, there's been tremendous progress in moving Iraq forward to an area of stability and to continuing to see the troops there in Iraq stand on their own. And I think that he is very pleased with the action that General Mattis and our soldiers and sailors, airmen, and Marines are taking to do that. Jeff?
I was going to follow up. If you couple that comment with the comment on healthcare, it being the easy one to get that done, it sounds like you probably have heard this and come across this notion that he's just detached from reality in making those comments.
Well, first of all, I think that I again would respectfully ask you that you review the tape. He was having a lighthearted moment. It's on tape. Everybody watched it. He was poking fun and making a joke. There's been comments before about how he didn't get it, and he was joking about how easy it was. Okay, it was a lighthearted moment. It was on tape. I think everybody, and the idea that there's this, like, trying to make it look like, you know, was being utterly serious at the time is a little bit of a stretch.
Jim, one quick thing on Chairman Nunes.
But I think, just so we're clear, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
just to end
yes,
it,
sir.
that he was very proud of the work that our soldiers and sailors are doing over there in Iraq. There is a lot of work and a lot of progress that is being made, and the updates that he's getting from General Mattis on a daily basis.
But he doesn't think they're in combat, they're engaged in
No,
combat.
but again, I think the progress that's being made in Iraq and the fight against ISIS is going extremely well, and he's proud of it.
And I was just going to ask you very quickly on Chairman Nunes. Do you personally know who the source of Chairman Nunes' information is?
No.
You do not.
Jeff Mason.
One on two topics. First on healthcare, does the president want to start a new healthcare bill or tweak the one that did not go last week?
I think we're starting with where we are and trying to move that forward. I think that is the current vessel.
And on a separate topic, the president did not mention the Paris Agreement yesterday when he went to the EPA. Can you update us on his current thinking about that? Does he want the United States to stay in? And if he does, how does he expect the United States to meet its commitments without the Clean Power Plan?
I think that the Paris Agreement is still under discussion within the administration.
Do you have a deadline on when you'll know?
I can try to look into that. I don't have one at this time.
Thank you, Sean. Early voting has begun in the Georgia 6th Congressional District with a special election to fill the seat of Secretary Price. Some Democrats are billing this as a referendum on the president, the early days of the presidency. What does the White House think of that? Does President Trump plan to be involved at all in this race?
That's a good. Honestly, I've not even thought about it. I think that if needed, the president has always been very clear that he wants to support the team and help the team. Honestly, I've not tried to really focus on tried to shed that previous life a little. So I've not looked into the race in Georgia. I'm sure I'd best refer you to either the RNC or the NRCC on the state of that race. Okay, thank you guys very much. I'll see you tomorrow, Thursday. Take care. I do owe you one tomorrow. I'm sorry.
All right, and that is going to round out the White House press briefing with Sean Spicer. You heard, if you were listening to some of those questions earlier, our reporter, Ronica Cleary, was there.
Channel 2, going to take you outside the United States Supreme Court, where Senate
Star Fox Box giving us some information.
And other members of the Judiciary Committee.
So you heard Ronica ask a couple questions, and one of them was about this morning's events outside of in Capitol Hill, and you, if you heard his response, he said it was apparently a troubled individual, etc. So he did comment on the bravery and the importance and heroism of Capitol Police keeping us out of harm's way day to day. So a few comments there about the incident that Ronica was able to ask Sean Spicer just now. She'll have more on her story tonight on the evening shows, as well as our reporter Tom Fitzgerald will have his story on the events this morning in Capitol Hill. So for now, we're going to jump over just to an event that was about an hour and a half ago inside the White House. President Trump in a roundtable discussing opioid addiction. He's joined by Chris Christie there as well. I think that is just the tail end of this, but we'll jump over there just for now.
To strengthen law enforcement and dismantle criminal cartels. Drug cartels have spread their deadly industry across our nation, and the availability of cheap narcotics. I mean, the narcotics, some of it comes in cheaper than candy, has devastated our communities. It's really one of the biggest problems our country has, and nobody really wants to talk about it. Vice President Pence mentioned this coming into the room. He said this is a problem like nobody understands, and I think they're going to start to understand it. More importantly, we have to solve the problem. Our Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, is working very hard on this problem. It takes a lot of his time. because this causes so much of the crime that you have to solve, that problem. So solving the drug crisis will require cooperation across government and across society, including early intervention to keep America's youth off this destructive path. We must work together, trust each other, and forge a true partnership based on the common ground of cherishing human life. So this is a very, very important meeting, and maybe we'll go around the room and we'll just say hello to everybody so we all know who we are. And then the press will leave and we'll start talking, okay? General Sessions, we know who you are. Keep up the good work. Go ahead.
Betsy DeVos, Secretary of Education.
David Shulkin, Secretary of VA.
Pam Garozo, parent of Carlos.
AJ Solomon, thanks for introducing me, Mr. President.
Vanessa, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, thank you.
Sean Kelly, Homeland Security.
Don Ryan, Acting Assistant Secretary for Health.
Chuck Rosenberg, I run the EPA.
Richard Brown, Acting Director of the Office of National Presidential Policy.
Great.
Bertha McGrath, Harvard Medical School. Pam Bond, the Attorney General's lawyer.
Mariano Rivera, founder of the Mariano Rivera Foundation.
Oh, they could use you now. You know, I think you'd make $100 million a year right now. They'd pay him. I watched for many years, Mariano. I'd sit with George, and George always felt good when Mariano was brought in. He never had to worry.
Nope.
He threw the heaviest pitch anytime. I don't know, you made the ball like it weighed 30 pounds, right?
Something like that.
How about the broken bats? How many broken bats?
Yeah, too many.
All right, those bats they just used to crack, right?
On
Thank
firewood.
you, thank you, great honor, thanks, Brian. And Jared, thank you, and Chris. Chris, why don't you say a few words?
Mr. President, first, to the President and the Vice President, thank you so much for focusing on this issue. As you know, Mr. Vice President, as the governor of Indiana for 4 years, this issue causes enormous pain and destruction to everyday families in every state in this country. And that's why, Mr. President, I thought it was so important to bring Pam and AJ and Vanessa here today for you to meet them and hear directly from them their stories. I'm just so honored that the President would ask me to take on this task with the group that we've put together. And I'm thrilled to work with the Attorney General as well on the issues of prevention and interdiction of drugs so we don't get people hooked in the first place. But the most important thing to me is I think the President and I both agree that addiction is a disease. And it's a disease that can be treated. And that we need to make sure we let people know. The President talked about how folks don't talk about it. We talk about cancer, we talk about heart disease, we talk about diabetes, and we're not afraid to talk about it. But people are afraid and ashamed to talk about drug addiction. And while they don't talk about it, we lose lives. Lives of good people. In the end, the President ended by talking about life, and he and I are both pro-life. The difference with the President and I is we're pro-life for the whole life, not just for the 9 months in the womb, but for the whole life. Every life is an individual gift from God, and no life is irredeemable. And people make mistakes, we all have. And the people who make the mistakes of drug use, and it is a mistake, we can't throw their life away. The President and I believe that every life is an individual gift from God and is precious. And I think that's why it was such an important issue to him in the campaign, and why I'm so honored to work with a President who understands the value of life and the value of second chances. And that's what this commission, I hope, is going to be about, to be able to give he and the Vice President the best suggestions we possibly can about how to have a national fight against this epidemic. So, Mr. President, thank you for your confidence in all of us, and thank you for your support.
Thank you very much. Maybe, Vanessa, you could tell a little bit of your story and how it's turned out so beautifully. We're so proud of you.
Don't know So, first of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you so much to bring this whole platform to a national level. You are literally, everyone at this table is saving lives. There is people dying every single day. It's heartbreaking. And Governor Christie, I need you to know that I draw so much strength and courage from you. You standing up for people that have nearly given up completely. It's extraordinary. I come from a small town in South Jersey. My aunt is a teacher, and she taught me the importance of education. My uncle's a firefighter. He taught me the importance of law and order. I went to a private high school. I was a cheerleader. I went to college where I joined a sorority. After I left college, I had an injury and was prescribed painkillers, and so quickly it took off from there. I didn't know anything about heroin. I was never warned, not that it's anybody else's fault. I take full
So
responsibility.
this all began very innocently with an injury.
Absolutely, yes, with the prescription of painkillers.
And what was it? What was the drug they gave?
Percocet.
I see.
And then from Percocet it went to Oxy. And then from Oxy, it went to heroin because it is definitely, like you said, more accessible and so much cheaper. Very quickly, I lost everything. I was homeless. I chose to be homeless. I was living on the streets of Atlantic City. I was in and out of jail, and I was lucky enough to see some kind of light where I became a drug court participant, a drug court system that we have in New Jersey, which saved my life. They sent me to a long-term treatment facility, Integrity House in New Jersey, and they saved my life.
How hard was that getting off this horrible stuff? How hard was it for you?
Physically, it was so hard, and I thought that was the hardest part, but then a couple months later comes the psychological aspect of it, and you still think that you need it. Because you're still not as happy when you're happy. You're still not as sad. You have no feelings. It's like you're a shell. And it takes over your whole life to choose to be homeless instead of live with your parents, to choose not to speak to your family.
And what did your parents say during this whole process? Because I'm looking at you, you're like all-American, perfect. Okay, you're a perfect person. And I'm saying it's hard to believe that you're living on the streets.
Well, it was so hard for my family. My mom would drive the streets of Atlantic City begging people to find me. She couldn't find me. I was that lost in every aspect of the word. In jail, like I said, I was sent to Integrity House, and they saved my life. They gave me a second chance at life. And from there, I went to a halfway house. I got a job where I quickly moved up. I'm now a manager, got my own apartment. I'm graduating drug court this year, and it's amazing the opportunities that have been given to me. I'm sitting across from you right now. 3 years ago, I didn't have a place to live. And today I'm here to represent the light that can be born out of the defeat of this darkness. There is hope, and there is a tomorrow, and there is a day after that. You just have to fight for it. And people have to know that there's people fighting for them too, because you give up. There becomes a point where you feel as if you have nothing. You already ruined everything, so there's no point to get sober. But I'm here to show you that there is hope. You can get better. There is a better way, and there is a better life. And I wish I could tell you the heartbreak that I feel with the people that are overdosing every day and dying, and the families that have to go through that suffering, because there's no need. We can help somebody. We can change this. And that's the most amazing thing I've ever been a part of in my whole life. And I would like to thank each and every one of you for giving me this opportunity. It means the world to me. It is my life. I used to think that being an addict was my downfall, but look at me. I'm here today. It's obviously made me a stronger and better person.
Incredible. Amazing job. Thank you very much, Vanessa. I'll talk to you in a little while. AJ, and I know how successful your father is and what a great man he is, so that also put pressure on you in a different way, right?
Yeah, well, I didn't end up going into politics, so.
Don't do it, AJ.
So, I mean, Vanessa really spelled it out, but I grew up in a little town in South Jersey called Haddonfield. It's a picturesque town, really good schools. My dad now is a Supreme Court justice in the state of New Jersey. Thank you for the appointment, Governor. And you know, my mom also serves in state government. And I grew up, I was, you know, a good student. I was an athlete. I found alcohol and other drugs, and I was probably well on my way to having an issue, but then I found Oxycontin. My dad got in an accident, and I decided that it'd be a good idea to try it, and that's really where my story started. You know,
Were you
now.
immediately hooked? Because I hear so much about OxyContin. Were you immediately hooked?
Yeah, when I did my first one, I remember doing it and thinking, this is how I want to live the rest of my life. You know, I was always searching for something outside of myself that would make me feel better. You know, people think the drug is the problem, and to some extent, its accessibility is, but addiction is a disease that I always had and just had to be unlocked, and that's what I feel OxyContin did for me. And when that happened, you know, now I'm a brother and a son and a business owner. I own a treatment center, which is awesome, and I love it. I'm so happy I went that route instead of, you know, I was on track, I was on the governor's advance team. Not that I didn't love it, but I really enjoy what I do, helping other alcoholics and addicts. Back then I was a
Do you have still an alcohol problem?
I don't drink, I don't do any drugs.
But that was, you could see you were going to have that problem, but you found this OxyContin.
Yeah. And you know, I was a thief and a liar, and I ended up homeless. Different story. My parents did not want me home. I was living out of my car, and then I ended up going to a long-term treatment center, and I accepted what I was, that I was an addict, and I would rather have died than live with that. So I left. My plan was to kill myself. I wasn't able to get home, so I surrendered. And you know, a lot of people don't believe this part of the story, and whatever someone's conception of God or a higher power is. I got on my knees on a shuttle back to treatment I hadn't used, and I said, God, either please just let me die, because my plan was to shoot myself. I didn't have a gun. Let me die, or just let me get this. And I swear to you that that obsession that Vanessa talked about to use was lifted that day. And my goal now in life is to help another alcoholic and an addict. And I think, you know, back then I would have rather died than had this disease. But now a normal person can be miserable, and they can be angry and resentful. And that's just how they'll live their life. Me, if I get angry, resentful, if I'm miserable, I'll drink, and then I'll do dope, heroin, and then I will die. So I'm grateful.
Not anymore, right?
I don't have, I'm not allowed to be miserable. I have to be trying to get the most out of life. Normal people don't have that. They won't die if they don't do that. So I'm grateful that I am what I am. Yeah, I guess that's it.
It's an amazing story. How did you get off it? Did you go to a center or something, or what happened?
I did. I went in the mountains in Arizona to this place, and I was only coming off opiates. And they said, it was this tall guy, I'll never forget, his name was Bird. He said, what are you coming off of? I said, opiates. He said, you don't need detox. You'll feel like you're going to die, but you won't die. And they put me in the center, and I detoxed cold turkey. And
what was that like?
It's like 20 times worse than the flu, but the anxiety is the worst part. The suicidal ideation is crawling out of your skin. I mean, if I had drugs in front of me, I would have done them.
So he was right.
Oh yeah, he was right.
But you got through it. How long did that take?
2 weeks.
It was 2 weeks of,
Physical.
They used to call it cold turkey, right? Do they still do that?
Yeah.
In a way. So you went through 2 weeks of that, and that was hell.
Yes.
But then you knew you were going to get better.
No, then the mental obsession came, and I wanted to use so badly, but I had accepted what I was, and I knew I couldn't, so I wanted the obsession to stop. I wanted my brain to stop yelling at me to pick up. I didn't want to be that person anymore, so I figured I'd kill myself and it would stop. But my dad, you talked about how powerful he is, he somehow canceled all my personal credit cards. I still don't know how he did it. And I wasn't able to get on a plane to get home to get what I needed to end my life. And so I got on my knees and prayed, and that was really the beginning.
So you did a great service when you did that.
He did.
Smart guy. You have done an amazing journey. It's so great. Not easy. Not easy, right, AJ?
No, not easy.
But we're very proud of you. Chris?
Mr. President, Pam works in the New Jersey State Department of Education, and she's someone who came to the candlelight vigil that I held right before Christmas for addicts in New Jersey and their families. And Pam wants to tell you the story about her son, Carlos.
All right, guys, some pretty compelling testimony coming out of that roundtable. We wanted to bring that to you. It occurred earlier this morning around 11 a.m., so some really, really amazing testimony from those two people that you heard from, Vanessa and AJ. That is just going to about do it. We're going to round out the show right here. Just so you know, you're watching Fox 5 Live. My name is Molly Nevola. And we're bringing you live events, live news coverage, breaking stuff all across DC and the nation midday for now. So tune into our YouTube stream to check it out. And we want to make sure we bring all that to you. And of course, thanks for watching this morning of our coverage of the Capitol Hill incident. We're going to have more for you on our evening shows tonight. So definitely check in. Tom Fitzgerald will have his full story about that incident. So for now, that's going to be it for today. Thanks again for joining. Thanks for watching. Please do comment on our YouTube stream. Let us know any questions and use our handle and hashtag Fox5DC. That's our handle on all social platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, everything. Please do check in with us again. Have a great day. We'll see you guys tomorrow.